It was a day I never expected to arrive, and yet there I was, standing at my father's funeral. The sky was heavy with gray clouds, but it didn't seem to matter. The people around me moved as if in a dream. They whispered condolences, their eyes filled with sympathy, but all I could feel was a hollowness in my chest that no one could fix. My name is David Campbell, and I'm the only child of Thomas Campbell. My father had been my world, and now, with him gone, I was left with nothing but memories, and the sting of betrayal. At the front, my stepmother, Claudia, stood poised in a long black dress that hugged her form in all the right places. She looked as if she belonged in a high society gathering, not at her husband's funeral. The sunlight glinted off the diamond necklace she wore, each stone catching the light like a sharp reminder of how little she'd cared for my father. Her expression, though, was carefully crafted, one of polite grief, but nothing more. She sipped champagne, as though she were attending a gala instead of mourning her late husband. I stood near the casket, my hands clenched so tightly that my knuckles were nearly white. I couldn't stop staring at my father's lifeless face, wondering how the man I once knew had become a shadow of himself in the last few years of his life. Claudia, young and beautiful, had entered our lives like a whirlwind, and in the end, I barely recognized the man who was my father. The funeral was a blur of faces, voices, and gestures. Relatives, some of whom I barely knew, came and went, offering empty words of sympathy. I didn't want to hear them. I didn't want to feel their pity. I wanted my dad back. I wanted things to be as they were when I was a kid, before Claudia came into our lives, before everything had begun to change. But it wasn't just her presence that had ruined everything. No, it was the way she'd taken over. Slowly, insidiously. She replaced the warmth of home with cold decor and empty conversations. I'd watched as my dad, once so full of life and care, became distant, more preoccupied with making Claudia happy than with being there for me. After the ceremony, we gathered in a small, quiet room adjacent to the chapel. It was dimly lit, with the sunlight filtering through stained glass windows, casting colorful shadows on the floor. I sat in the second row, my mind reeling, while Claudia took her place in the front, holding a champagne flute in her perfectly manicured hand, as though she were about to hear the results of a contest she had already won. The family lawyer, Mrs. Sinclair, entered the room with a leather folder containing the will. Her expression was unreadable, like a poker player who'd seen it all before. She cleared her throat and began reading, her voice calm, professional. Line after line, my world crumbled. To my beloved wife, Claudia Campbell, I leave everything, our house, the land, my savings, the lake cabin we built together. I entrust her with everything, with the intent that she will continue to honor the legacy of our family. My heart stopped. Claudia turned toward me, a smug smile curling on her lips. You'll understand one day, sweetie, she whispered, her voice dripping with false sweetness. But she didn't know what I knew. No, she didn't know that 2 nights ago, I had found something in the attic, a box hidden beneath the floorboards. The real will. My father's true intentions. And now, in this moment, I was ready to let the truth unfold. I stood up abruptly, feeling eyes in the room shift toward me. My legs shook, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I turned to Mrs. Sinclair, the family lawyer, and motioned to the briefcase I had brought with me. You're reading the wrong will, I said, my voice steady but filled with determination. The room fell silent. All eyes were on me, and I could feel the weight of their judgment, but I didn't care. This wasn't about me. It was about my father, about the man who had given his life to this family only to be betrayed in the end. Mrs. Sinclair raised an eyebrow but nodded, accepting the folder I handed her. She opened it slowly, the crackling sound of paper filling the silence. When she read the first line, her face grew pale. Claudia's smug expression faltered, her hand tightening around the champagne flute. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. I felt a small victory stirring within me. It was my turn now. I, Thomas Campbell, declare this document to be my final will and testament, and it supersedes all previous versions. I leave my entire estate, including my savings, property, and assets, to my son, David Campbell, with a stipulation that it be used to continue the legacy of our family name. The silence was deafening. Claudia's face twisted into an ugly mask of rage. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Her grip on the champagne flute loosened, and it fell to the ground with a sharp crack, spilling champagne across the floor. I could hardly believe what I had just heard. My father had made sure that I would have everything, everything he had worked for, everything he had built. And Claudia, The woman who had turned his life upside down would be left with nothing. The room seemed to shrink as I stood there, holding my breath. Claudia's eyes burned with fury as she stood, her hands shaking. I could feel the weight of her gaze piercing through me, and I knew this was just the beginning of a fight that would change everything. The silence that had engulfed the room was broken only by the faint sound of champagne dripping from the shattered glass onto the marble floor. "How dare you?" Claudia finally screamed, her voice laced with venom. "You think you can just walk in here and claim what's mine? What's rightfully mine?" Her face was flushed, a mix of anger and humiliation. Her perfectly styled hair had started to come loose, strands falling over her face, but she didn't seem to care. I didn't flinch. I had expected her to react this way. Claudia was a master manipulator, always getting what she wanted, even if it meant stepping over others to get it. But this time, she wouldn't win. "Claudia, this is not yours," I said, my voice calm but firm. "This is my father's legacy. And he wanted it to go to me." Her lips curled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, please," she sneered. "You think my husband would leave everything to you? You were nothing more than a disappointment to him. I was the one who stood by him when he was sick, the one who took care of him when he needed someone. You were always too busy to even visit." Her words stung, but I refused to let her see it. She had played that game for too long, using guilt and manipulation to control my father, to control me. But it was over. The truth was out, and there was no going back now. "That's where you're wrong, Claudia," I said, taking a step toward her. "You didn't stand by him. You controlled him. You pushed him away from me, from his family. He was miserable in the last years of his life, and you were the cause of that." She laughed, a high-pitched, mocking sound that made my blood boil. "You think I care about your opinions, David? You think I care about what your father thought in the end? I'm the one who inherits everything. I'm the one who gets the money, the house, everything. You're just a boy who didn't deserve a dime." The words stung, but I held my ground. "It's not about money, Claudia. It's about my father's wishes. He wanted me to take care of what he built. And I will, whether you like it or not." Claudia's eyes flashed with rage. She took a step forward, her hand trembling as she reached for her phone in her pocket. I knew what she was going to do before she even did it. She was going to call the lawyer, try to get me thrown out, try to make this all go away. "You don't understand, David," she hissed, her eyes narrowing. "I'm not going to let you take everything from me. You think you can just walk in here and claim what's mine? I won't let you." Before I could say anything more, she snapped her phone shut and turned on her heels, heading toward the door. She was angry, desperate. But what she didn't realize was that the game had changed. I wasn't the scared little boy I used to be. I was a man now, and I wasn't backing down. As the door slammed behind her, I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. I had said my piece, and now it was time to wait. But I knew, deep down, that this wouldn't be the end of it. Claudia wouldn't just walk away. She'd fight me tooth and nail, and I was ready for that. I turned back to Mrs. Sinclair, who had been standing silently by the side, watching the whole scene unfold. Her expression was one of curiosity, mixed with a hint of apprehension. "Mr. Campbell, I don't believe anyone was expecting this turn of events," she said, her voice calm. "But I assure you, the will is legally binding. There is nothing Claudia can do to change it now." "Thank you, Mrs. Sinclair," I replied, feeling a slight weight lift off my shoulders. But I knew the battle was far from over. Claudia wouldn't accept defeat so easily. "Is there anything else I need to know? Any other documents I should be aware of?" Mrs. Sinclair hesitated for a moment, her eyes flickering between me and the door where Claudia had just exited. "There is one more thing, Mr. Campbell. A clause in your father's will that might complicate things. He stipulated that the inheritance would only be fully transferred to you if you can prove that you're capable of managing the estate. That includes the house, the lake cabin, and the financial assets. You'll need to prove that you can keep the legacy intact." I felt my stomach drop. It wasn't just about inheriting everything, it was about proving myself worthy of it. My father had always believed in me, but this was more than just a symbolic gesture. It was a test, and I had to pass it. "I understand," I said, nodding slowly. "I'll take care of it." As Mrs. Sinclair left the room, I sat down at the table, staring at the papers in front of me. The weight of responsibility was heavier than I had anticipated. My father had left me a legacy, but it was one I wasn't sure I was ready to handle. But I had no choice now. I had to step up and take control, for him, for myself, and for the future. The following week, everything felt different. The house, once a place of comfort, now seemed like a cold, unfamiliar space. I had never imagined that inheriting my father's estate would feel so daunting. The walls that had once echoed with laughter, warmth, and family gatherings now felt like a prison, a constant reminder of the battle ahead. Claudia hadn't been in touch since our confrontation. I knew she was plotting something, scheming behind the scenes, trying to find a way to undermine me. She had always been resourceful, manipulative, and determined to get her way, no matter the cost. But this time, I wasn't going to let her win. This time, I had the law on my side. But the challenge wasn't just Claudia, it was everything else. My father's will was complicated, filled with clauses and conditions that I hadn't anticipated. Mrs. Sinclair had been right when she mentioned the stipulation about proving my ability to manage the estate. It wasn't enough to simply inherit the property, I had to show that I could preserve it, grow it, and ensure its future success. I spent the next few days poring over the documents my father had left behind. He had been meticulous in his planning, his handwriting clear and precise on every page. There were detailed instructions on how the estate was to be maintained, from the upkeep of the lake cabin to the management of the financial assets. But there was one thing that stood out, an investment portfolio that my father had carefully cultivated over the years. It was worth millions, and it was up to me to ensure that it continued to thrive. I wasn't an expert in finances, but I wasn't an idiot either. I knew that this was going to require a steep learning curve. I contacted a financial advisor, someone my father had worked with for years, and arranged a meeting. As I sat in the conference room, waiting for the advisor to arrive, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was stepping into territory I wasn't prepared for. The door opened, and a man in his 50s walked in. He had a calm, professional demeanor, wearing a dark suit and carrying a briefcase. He introduced himself as Peter Green, the financial advisor my father had trusted for years. "Mr. Campbell," he said, extending his hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you. Your father spoke highly of you. I'm here to help you with the estate's financial management, and I'm confident that with the right strategy, we can continue the legacy he built." I shook his hand firmly, trying to mask my nerves. "Thank you, Mr. Green. I'm glad you're here. I need to understand everything. The portfolio, the investments, how it all works. I want to make sure I don't make any mistakes." He smiled slightly. "That's the right attitude, Mr. Campbell. Your father was a very careful investor, and his portfolio is solid. But we'll need to make some decisions to ensure its future growth. Let's start by reviewing the key assets." As he spoke, I listened closely, taking notes. He explained the intricacies of stocks, bonds, and mutual funds, detailing the performance of various investments my father had made over the years. It was all so much to take in at once, and I felt the pressure mounting. I wasn't just managing a few investments, I was responsible for an entire empire. I had to make sure that I didn't lose everything my father had worked for. "Now, Mr. Campbell," Peter continued, "there's also the matter of the lake cabin. It's an asset in its own right, but there's work that needs to be done. The property is aging, and there are repairs that need to be addressed immediately if you want to preserve its value." The mention of the lake cabin struck a chord with me. My father had loved that cabin. It had been our retreat, a place where we could escape the chaos of the world and just be a family. I remembered the summer vacations we'd spent there, the laughter around the bonfire, the quiet mornings by the lake. It was more than just a property, it was a part of our family's history, and I couldn't let it fall into disrepair. "I'll take care of it," I said, my voice firm. "I want to make sure the cabin stays in good condition." My father would have wanted that. Peter nodded. "I'll make the necessary arrangements and get estimates from contractors. We'll prioritize the most urgent repairs." As the meeting came to an end, I felt a sense of relief mixed with uncertainty. I had learned a lot, but I knew that this was just the beginning. I wasn't out of the woods yet. Claudia could still try to contest the will, and there were still many more decisions to be made. When I returned home that afternoon, I found a letter waiting for me on the kitchen counter. It was from Claudia. I hesitated for a moment before opening it, not knowing what to expect. As I read her words, I felt my heart drop into my stomach. "David, I'm writing to you because I want to make things right. I've been thinking a lot about our last conversation, and I realize that I may have overreacted. This whole situation has been hard for me, and I know it's been hard for you too. I want to propose a compromise. If you're willing to meet with me, I think we can work something out. Let's sit down and talk. I don't want this to tear our family apart. Claudia. I stared at the letter, unsure of how to respond. Part of me wanted to believe her, to think that maybe she had a change of heart. But deep down, I knew better. Claudia was always about control, about winning at any cost. There was no way she was just going to walk away quietly. This letter was just another tactic, another way for her to get what she wanted. I folded the letter and placed it in the trash. There would be no compromise with Claudia. Not this time. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but I was ready. I wasn't going to let anyone take away what was rightfully mine, especially not Claudia. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and paperwork. Every day felt like an uphill battle, and I was constantly reminded of the weight of responsibility that had fallen onto my shoulders. The financial advisor, Peter Green, was doing his best to help me navigate the complexities of the estate, but there was one thing I couldn't ignore: Claudia. She wasn't backing down. Even though I had refused to meet with her, she continued to send letters and make phone calls, trying to convince me to settle things amicably. Each letter was a mix of apology and demand, as if she wanted to smooth things over while still holding onto the idea that she deserved more than what she'd been given. One day, as I sat in my office going through more legal documents, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. My stomach tightened as I answered it. "David," came Claudia's voice, cold and determined. "We need to talk." I gripped the phone tightly, fighting the urge to hang up. "I've told you before, Claudia. There's nothing to talk about. You're making a huge mistake," she snapped. "This is your last chance. If you don't reconsider, I will go to court. I will fight for what's mine." I could feel my blood boil, but I kept my voice steady. "You have no case, Claudia. The will is clear. This estate is mine." "Maybe," she said, her voice dripping with venom, "but we both know that the law can be twisted. And you know I have the resources to make things difficult for you. Are you prepared for that?" I didn't respond immediately. The truth was, I was worried. Claudia had always known how to play the game. She had money, influence, and the connections to cause serious trouble. But I wasn't about to back down. "I don't care what you think you can do," I said finally, my voice firm. "I'm not afraid of you. If you want to go to court, fine. But I won't be intimidated." She laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "You'll regret this. I'll make sure of it." With that, she hung up, leaving me to sit in stunned silence. The phone call had only reaffirmed what I already knew: Claudia wasn't going to let this go. But I wasn't about to let her bully me into submission either. That afternoon, I met with Mrs. Sinclair, the lawyer who had helped my father with his estate planning. I needed her advice, more than ever. "David," she said, her voice as calm as ever, "I've reviewed everything. Your father's will is airtight, but Claudia will fight you in every way possible. She knows how to manipulate the system, and she'll try to drag you through the mud." "I'm ready for that," I replied, my resolve hardening. "I'm not giving up this estate. It's mine, and I'm going to protect it." Mrs. Sinclair nodded. "Good. But remember, this isn't just about the money. It's about family. You'll have to deal with Claudia's emotional manipulation. She'll play the victim, she'll make you feel guilty, and she'll try to make you doubt yourself. Don't let her get under your skin." Her words echoed in my mind long after the meeting ended. It wasn't just the legal battle I had to fight, it was the emotional toll that came with it. Claudia knew how to push my buttons, how to make me question my worth. She had always done that, ever since we were kids. But I wasn't that insecure boy anymore. I had changed. And I wasn't going to let her manipulate me into giving up. The next few days were a blur of phone calls, meetings, and endless paperwork. I met with contractors about the cabin, finalized investments with Peter Green, and tried to keep everything running smoothly. But in the back of my mind, Claudia's threats loomed. She was relentless, and I knew she wasn't going to give up easily. Then, one morning, I received a package in the mail. It was from Claudia. My heart sank as I ripped open the envelope, fearing what I might find. Inside, there was a single piece of paper, an official-looking document. It was a petition to contest the will, filed with the court. Claudia had gone ahead and taken the first step in a legal battle I had hoped to avoid. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the paper in disbelief. My hands trembled as I read through the petition. She was challenging the validity of the will, claiming that my father had been under duress when he made the decision to leave me everything. She was accusing him of being manipulated by me, of not being in his right mind when he drafted the will. I couldn't believe what I was reading. This was beyond manipulation. This was a calculated move, a ruthless attack on everything I held dear. I took a deep breath and called Mrs. Sinclair. "David," she said when she answered, "I figured this was coming. Don't worry. We'll handle this. You just need to focus on gathering evidence that supports the validity of the will. We'll prove that Claudia's accusations are false." But even as she reassured me, I felt the sinking feeling in my chest. This was just the beginning. The battle was going to get even uglier. I had no idea how far Claudia was willing to go, but I knew one thing for certain: I wasn't going to let her tear my family's legacy apart. Not without a fight. As the days passed, the pressure continued to mount. The media began to pick up on the story, and soon, the court battle was in the public eye. My phone was flooded with calls from reporters, and I had to be cautious about everything I said. And then, one evening, as I was leaving a meeting with the contractors, I got a call from an unknown number. I hesitated for a moment, but then answered it. "David," Claudia's voice came through the line, cold and calculated. "This is your final warning. Give me what I want, or I'll make sure this goes to trial. And I'll make sure you lose." I was done playing games. "I'm not giving up, Claudia. Not now, not ever." She paused for a moment before speaking again. "We'll see about that." The call ended, and I knew that this was only the beginning of what would be a long, hard fight. But I was ready. I had to be. There was too much at stake. The tension in the air was palpable as the court date drew closer. Every day felt like it could be the breaking point, and with each passing moment, I felt the weight of the battle grow heavier. Claudia had left no stone unturned in her pursuit of the estate. She'd hired the best legal team money could buy, and I knew I couldn't afford to make a single misstep. The stakes were higher than ever, not just for me but for my family. For weeks, I had been working with Mrs. Sinclair to gather evidence, reviewing every piece of paperwork my father had left behind. We pulled together a strong case to prove that the will was legitimate. It wasn't just about the money, it was about preserving my father's legacy and the trust he had placed in me. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became that my father had made his decisions with a clear mind, and Claudia's accusations were nothing more than a desperate attempt to claim what wasn't hers. I knew the courtroom would be a battleground, but I wasn't prepared for how it would feel. The first day was brutal. Claudia's lawyer was sharp, relentless in his cross-examination, trying to break me down, make me question everything I knew. But I stood my ground. Every piece of evidence I presented, every witness who confirmed my father's state of mind, spoke for itself. As the days passed, the pressure intensified. I had become a figure of public scrutiny. The media, always hungry for a story, painted me as the villain, greedy, cold, heartless. But inside, I was doing everything I could to keep my emotions in check. I couldn't let the public perception get to me. This was about family, about doing what was right. Then, on the fourth day of trial, everything changed. Claudia stood up in the middle of the courtroom, her lawyer beside her, and she did something I never expected. She dropped her case. The room fell silent, and for a moment, I couldn't comprehend what had just happened. Claudia, the woman who had fought tooth and nail for the estate, was suddenly giving up? The judge looked around, confused, and then asked, "Miss Harrington, are you withdrawing your case?" Claudia's eyes were filled with emotion, something I had never seen before. She looked at me for a long moment, her face pale and weary. Then, she nodded. "Yes," she said, her voice soft but resolute. "I'm withdrawing the petition." There was a stunned silence in the courtroom as the judge confirmed the withdrawal. Mrs. Sinclair shot me a quick, relieved glance, but I couldn't fully absorb the reality of what was happening. Claudia was stepping away, and the estate, the legacy, everything that had been in jeopardy, was now officially mine. But there was something else in the air. Claudia wasn't done. She stood there for a moment longer before speaking again, her voice cracking slightly. "I didn't want this. I didn't want any of this," she said, her words laced with a mixture of regret and pain. I didn't know how to cope with losing him. Losing my father. The admission hung in the air, and it was a moment that made everything feel different. For the first time in this entire ordeal, Claudia wasn't just the woman trying to take everything from me. She was a broken person, grieving in her own way, hiding behind anger and frustration. I realized then that this wasn't about money or power for her. It had never been. She took a shaky breath and looked directly at me. "I'm sorry, David," she whispered. "I was wrong. I should have never done this. I was just angry. And I didn't know how to deal with it." The apology wasn't much, but it was something. It was a crack in the wall that had been built between us. I took a moment, letting her words sink in before responding. I understand, I said quietly, surprised by how calm I felt. I understand more than you know. For a long moment, we just stood there, facing each other across the courtroom, two people who had been brought together by pain, by loss, by a family torn apart. And in that moment, something shifted. The judge called the proceedings to an end, declaring that the case was dismissed, and the estate was now legally mine. But there was something else that had been settled, something that wasn't part of any legal document or court ruling, the tension between Claudia and me. It wasn't gone, but it had been alleviated, even if just a little. After the trial, I sat down with Claudia. We didn't speak much during the following days, but we didn't need to. The tension that had once been between us was no longer there, and I realized that we had both been carrying the same burden, grief. In the end, what mattered wasn't the money or the property. It was understanding each other's pain, and perhaps, starting to heal from it. The next few months were quiet. Claudia and I never became close again, but there was a new understanding between us. We spoke occasionally, not about the estate or our father, but about life. The kind of small talk that siblings make when they don't have anything left to fight over. As for the estate, I took my father's legacy seriously. I decided to restore the old family cabin, turning it into a place where my children could grow up, creating new memories, while honoring the past. I didn't want the legacy of my father to be tainted by the greed or the bitterness that had once threatened to destroy it. And as for me, I learned a valuable lesson. Family is more than just blood, more than inheritance. It's about shared history, love, and ultimately, forgiveness. And though Claudia and I would never be as close as we once were, we had both taken a step toward healing. That, in the end, was what mattered most.